Hey, good to see you here. Happy to have you. We're going to be coding a little bit here, jumping into some React and specifically getting into text input handling. If you're part of the class, sweet, good to have you here. If you're not part of the class, also good to have you here. You might not have access to that immediate page that we're looking at here. But I will provide the link to the code sandbox in the YouTube video as well. So we're going to start this one. I know in the last video we said we were going to do both conditional rendering and text input handling together, but clearly that didn't. The last one ended up a little long, so we broke it into two videos. Boom, here we go. So we're going to start afresh here, looking at text input handling, and we'll get a bit of a review of conditional rendering and more into the text input handler. So you can boom click this right here to get a fresh template on our wonderful code sandbox. We love our code sandbox, our online IDE, which allows us to write code here. And we're just starting with the basic template, nothing fancy, and we're just going to build this all out in app at the moment. So looking, here's our HTML. This is the basics, and here's the idea. Let's make a React greeting card. Yeah, let's make one where someone enters their name and then we'll give them back their name with a friendly little greeting. And so it'll be a nice thing to put out into the world. So here we go. Let's start by saying, hello, what is your name? And then under that, we're going to want to have an input field, right, where someone can like enter their name. And so we're going to use exactly that nomenclature. We're going to say input. And we are afforded all kinds of inputs from HTML, all different types. The default is going to be this text box, but just checking out, you can jump on the W3 Schools. There's so many different text input types to get information from your users. You can have them pick dates, you can have file, you can have all kinds of stuff. So do check out those different ones. And the way that we access that is with the property type. So inside of this input HTML tag, we can give it the property type, and that type can be all different types. I think it comes in curly braces. Oh, it might actually be in and we can say text here. Yeah, there we go, and that'll give us a text box. If we put like date, for example, ooh, all of a sudden, fork it, I forgot. We're working on that template. Save your work, everybody. Make sure that you save it, and we'll say, this is input handling X example. All right, so sweet. Saving. And so you can get all different types of inputs from your users, and that kind of like toggles what input it is. And here we're interested in, of course, text. We want text. What's your name comes in not a date, but text here. And so it'll give us a little text box. With any luck. And the input is self-closing and takes all kinds of things, and we're actually going to be looking at a few things. So to look at it, we're going to take this into a few different lines, because we're gonna want a placeholder. Placeholder is a sweet property to throw on this, and that's just like, hey, what appears in the box in its place, and we can say your name. And then check it out, and that's what goes there until they type something. Yeah, so we like the placeholder. Placeholder's nice little guidance for people. It would be a good idea, of course, to include class name to style this out. We're not doing styles in this lesson, so we'll just not include those. But in order to, you'll notice, like right now, of course, we can't. our input does nothing, right? We enter it and nothing happens, right? Nothing happens. And so like we would like a place maybe for the name to go, and we can go like this. We could say like, hey, give him an H2 at the bottom of the page, a little bit under, and say, I don't know, let's see, hey, and then your name goes here, your name, the name, like we'll put user name should go there. Hey, username, hope you have a great day. We can even make that a conditional render a bit later so that it appears once we're done, as a reminder to that. But check this out, boom. All right, so we want the username to go there. Of course, right now it just says username. So the idea is when they input something here, we want that to ultimately appear where username is. And so in order to handle this input, to grab the information and do something with it, we're going to use, again, this idea of hooks, which allows us to use variables and stuff to store information. So we'll say we're going to create as a constant, and it's going to be the username, right? We call the username, and let's say the username is Billamina. Now, strings, when you're using words that are actually letters like this, they actually come in quotes. So we gotta do it like that in order to give us a without that it looks for a variable, but with these quotes it'll use this as what's called a string, those actual letters, Billamina. And we would love this to go where username is and say, hey Billamina, hope you have a great day. But right now, of course, it's only showing username. We wanted to show the variable username. Remember, the way that we can access variables is by throwing those curly brackets around it. So now that we have curly brackets, it's like not the word username, the string username, but actually grab the variable username, which we defined as Billamina. Hey Billamina, hope you have a great day. Sweet. So now we have a variable connected to that, but it still is not, if I was like George, it's still not connected to that, right? So the way we can connect these things, of course, is with the hook to set the state. We need to set the username. We need a function to set the username, which we put right here in our hook. Those hard brackets. Yep, like we've talked about before. Excellent. So now we have a way of changing that username, this variable username, which before we've used as a Boolean true and false for conditional rendering. Here we're using it to access a strings letters. And so we can change that with set username. And we want to change that, within input. And it changed up when I saved it, changed my formatting a little bit, but I would love it like this, which I think it'll do. So input, our input has the type text, it has that placeholder, had your name, and now we're going to add something fancy to it. Like before with our button where we had an on click, we also have a property that we can access called on change. And on change we're going to say is equal to this JavaScript. It's going to be we need an arrow function, so we don't get an infinite loop here. And it's going to do what? We want it to set the username. Okay. On change, we want to set the username. And what do we want to change it to? Bob? Sure. Now, check it out. I go right here, go here, and Bob is not defined. Oh, right, because we need this as a string. It was looking for a variable, so now it's a string. So, why is it just being a Billamina? Let me look at this for a second. Strange. And when we type, boom, set username, is not username is not a function. Oh, right, yes. Ultimately, we forgot to make this a use state. Yes, of course, right? So we wanted a use state, and the use state allows us to access these variables. And in order to use state, we need to import it up top. Yes, of course, to use the state. And this is the big hook that we learned last time, is this use state, which allows us to use the state Wilhelmina for username, and then to have access to this function set username, which we grab on change. So whenever this input changes, it's going to set the username to Bob. Now it says the use state is Wilhelmina, of course, boom. And then when this changes, what's going to happen? It immediately changes to Bob. Now we don't want to, not everyone's name is Bob, so we don't want it to say Bob, but that's how set username works. It happens immediately when it changes. And so we actually want to do something fancy here. We're going to access something called the event. When this changes, an event happens, and it comes to us as this object. And it has different stuff inside of it. And one of the things that we're looking at is the target. And because this is the thing that we're looking at specifically, and then within the target, there is a value which is grabbing the value of the input. If some of that didn't make sense, that's all right. Ultimately, what we need written inside of set username is the event target value, event.target.value, which is the secret code to get whatever it is people are typing in here. So check this out. Let me refresh it. So it's using the state Wilhelmina, right? Boom. That's what username is. And then every time I change it, it's going to take whatever I'm changing it to and set the username to it. This is how it works. I'm like Josh. Hey, see? So this thing's event target value is exactly what we're setting the username to, boom, in place. So that's what, and then as soon as we set it, that's what username is. And we're spitting that right out into this greeting. Now, it would be really nice to have a toggle, just as a little friendly reminder. Let's throw a little button that toggles between these two. So one is hidden, the greeting is hidden, and it's all you see is the question at first, and then once you submit your name, then all of a sudden is revealed our sentence. Very similar perhaps to our final assignment, which is going to be Mad Lib. So we're going to want a button here, and we're going to want the button, and the button is a closer, and then the button has and I'm going to do this a little bit quickly because we covered this in the last video for a little bit slower and in depth. You can check out the last one, but we're going to say submit, throw a submit button on there. And what doesn't it like? Oh geez, slightly dyslexic. And so there we go. Great. So this submit button, we're going to want to change a view. We're going to do this with our Boolean. So we're going to create another hook up here. And this hook is going to be our Boolean that shows and hides things, does our conditional rendering. And so we're going to say, is it the, let's see if it's a question state. So if the question state, and then we're going to set the question state. And we're going to use the state, true. So it's true that's in question state. In other words, it's true that it's asking you a question. Yeah? And so we want to render all this. This is great. We're doing this on purpose to cover something that didn't so get covered the last one. So if the question state's true, then we want to show this stuff. If it's not true, then we want to show this stuff. And immediately, we should be able to wrap this. What, it didn't let me do it. Undo it. Wait a second. So I want to wrap from here to here. I want to wrap in these curly braces and make it a conditional saying, hey, if the question state is true, if we should be seeing the question, then I want to see both the question and the input, right? So we say the question and that stuff. And we're going to get an error, boom, because React, if you'll recall, what it's saying here is, hey, all this should be returning a single object, but this is not a single object, it's two objects. It's an h1 and an input, and you can return multiple objects if it's all contained in a single one, which is a little bit of this weird cheat, but that's how it works. So we're going to wrap the whole thing inside of a div, opening up the div, and just to kind of show you what's going on here. So we have the div there, right, which contains an h1 and an input, and then we want to close the div. Yeah, so ultimately we're saying, hey, if the question state's true and this stuff's true, which HTML always turns true, then it'll show it. If the question state is false, then it doesn't show it. And just to demo that again, boom, currently the question state is true, so it should be showing this, and you see the question in this. And then if I set this to false, all of a sudden it disappears here. So we want this button to toggle that back and forth, and we want the other one to be the inverse, right? So we're going to do both of those. We're going to say, hey, if the question state, and I'll just copy this for our second one, if the question state and this h2 are true, which it should be just true, then it shows it, but if not, but actually we want the, and let me clean up my code here. So now we have a conditional for this response, this greeting that we have here, but we want the opposite of the question state. So we want it to be the opposite of that guy. And remember, we can do that by giving an exclamation point. So now we are able to look at the question and the input field when it's true, and when it's false, of course, it shows our greeting. And then we want this button to go back and forth between it, and we can do that no problem. And so the quick and easy way of doing it is giving it again that on-click listener. We got a on-click property here, which will say we need an arrow function. So open, close, and then our arrow, which I always think is pretty cool. And then we're going to set, what's it called again? Set question state. And I'll just copy and paste this. We're going to set the question state, not to just the opposite of the Boolean, but the opposite of the question, right? We don't just want it to turn it true or false. We want it to do the opposite of whatever it is, because now it's true and it always it continues to be true. So in fact, we want the opposite of whatever the question state is. So we can do that again with that cool exclamation point. This will set it to the opposite of whatever the current state is. So if we save all this, let's see if this works. Boom. And now we can go back and forth. The default right now is Wilhelmina, but if I was like, hey, enter your name, and my name was Henry, and I press submit, hey, Henry, hope you have a great day. That's very nice. That's nice for Henry, and for those of you who aren't named Henry, I suppose you can pretend. So there we go. This is how it works. We just covered two things, a little review on conditional rendering and how we can do that, along with some, of course, our input handler, which has a type to it, a placeholder is kind of nice for it, and then our onChange, which is integral. We used our onChange to call the set username so that we could hold that username information to use elsewhere in our code. So we can set our username to whatever the event target value was, whatever happens target value. Yep. So fantastic. Hope this was interesting or whatever to you. It went a little bit long, but we will cut it here. All right. Happy coding, everybody.